Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Eloqua User Group, our first live user group for the US. We're thrilled to be with you and hope that what we can deliver today adds some value to your interactions with Eloqua. So let me introduce myself and those who are supporting me on the webinar today. My name is Derek Bell. I'm your host. I'm the Director of Customer Success and Marketing here at Marketing Cube. And I've got Matt Hemsley, our marketing manager, and also Jason O'Donnell, our account director. So the guys will be helping manage the Q&A. So if you do have questions throughout the session, please go ahead and use the Q&A function to add those questions to the meeting and cover off some housekeeping. So as you probably have figured out by now, we use Zoom to host and record our webinars, and the replays will be available on our blog. And just to reinforce questions, we love questions, so please feel free to ask those questions using the Q&A function. And also just be aware that your questions are visible to all attendees, and you can actually upvote. And if you know the answer, please jump in and answer some of those questions as well. We'd love to have your participation. And if you do need to ask a private question, just go ahead and use the chat function, and we'll have a look at that for you as well. Alrighty, so what's on the agenda for today? So we follow a fairly regular format for these webinars. We've been doing them now across Asia Pac and Europe for nearly two or 3 years. And so we cover off a little bit of an introduction, go straight into our topic, uncovering the less engaged contacts and re-engagement strategies and tips. And then when appropriate, we've got information and updates about the Eloqua release. And so many of you will probably be waiting on that release for 21A, which for many of you is this weekend. So we'll cover off a few points there for you to think about, and then go into a more open Q&A if there are questions. But at the point of registration, there was an opportunity to ask some questions, and we did get one question from Daniel in Colombia. And Daniel's question related very much so to what we're talking about today, and that is, what is the frequency recommended for re-engagement campaigns? Great question. And we'll cover a bit more of this as we go throughout the webinar today. But in a quick response, I suppose, to Daniel, the frequency really, we'd suggest, will be determined by your audience. It really depends on what sort of a commercial relationship you have with the people you're talking to, and within your own database, it's highly likely that there would be multiple segments that you would approach in different ways. So it's not that you would re-engage just simply inactive contacts in the database. You would probably segment them and have different schedules potentially. One tip or idea is to think about the buying cycle. So how often is it that people have to purchase from you? Is it a daily, weekly exercise? Does it happen quarterly? Is it an annual exercise? It might be every 2 years. It really depends. If you think about insurance products, for example, so insurance products typically are a 12-month cycle. And so perhaps looking at something around that period is a good idea from a re-engagement point of view. But as I said there at the bottom, you could also consider something like an always-on style re-engagement campaign with some clever filters looking at that information so that it's not something that you have to work towards every 6 or 12 months. It's just simply working itself away every day or once a week, potentially, as it moves through. So welcome. Something we've decided to do this year, a little bit of a COVID response, you might say, is select some images in the background of our slides to encourage tourism and travel. Now, I appreciate it's a fairly long way for you to travel to Australia, and we can't wait to have you back in the country, I can assure you of that. This is from Phillip Island, which is in the south of Australia near Melbourne. So you can go whale watching. Plus, you can see penguins there, so it's a pretty beautiful place. But in the introduction, what we'd like to do is show you and share with you some of the attribution data in relation to the particular webinar today. And so we did a little bit of analysis to understand how you came to hear about us. And we found that it was almost an even split between those who we knew through our own database, who have previously contacted us and potentially participated in the user group here. And then we also did some very targeted advertising through LinkedIn. And so some of you on the call today would potentially be responding to that advertisement from LinkedIn. So thank you. Thank you for joining us. And we also asked, depending on how you came into that registration point, we asked you some questions about your use of Eloqua and how often you access Eloqua. So then from asking you how often you access Eloqua, we then also make some assumptions as to where you might fit on this particular scale. And so you can see the bulk of people, 79.2%, we would identify as an Eloqua power user. So welcome, guys. Great to have you with us, but welcome to everybody. It's good to have you here. And then one of the final questions we asked, and again, this will depend on where you came from, but also what we were able to infer from some of the LinkedIn data is where you're from. And so for us as a business, we're looking to target the Americas. And so that stretches obviously all the way from the north to the south. And so we have Canada, the US, Colombia, Spain, quite a ways over in Europe. So thank you if you're on the line with us today, and also someone from India on the other side of the planet. So I couldn't show that one. So what I wanted to do there, the reason we show some of that information is just to really help point out that from a webinar point of view and that registration process, there's quite a bit of information that you can help garner from your audience. And simply asking the same questions every month is potentially a lost opportunity. Webinars are a great way to sort of build that profile information, and progressive profiling within Eloqua is certainly one way to help do that. So something that we wanted to do to kind of get us thinking in relation to why are we on the webinar today, throughout the Asia Pac and European markets, we have access to many instances of Eloqua through our customers. And so I randomly selected, and there won't be any names involved in this, I promise. We randomly selected 4 clients to get an idea of some pretty basic numbers. So what we're looking at, first of all, here is the actual size of their database. Now we have clients who have many more contacts than this, and we have a few clients who have a lot less contacts than this. But what we wanted to focus on was, in contrast of their total database size, how many of those contacts have not been sent an email within the last 12 months. Now, I'll let you figure out the percentages, but I think the numbers speak for themselves. So there could be multiple reasons potentially for this, but what we've done, those numbers on the right-hand side, they exclude anybody who has been flagged as a hard bounce or anybody who is flagged as globally unsubscribed. And so in reality, those numbers that you see there, there's no reason why these organizations can't be sending those people an email. So then the question is, why? Now, of course, it's feasible. That was a pretty basic filter, as I said, that I applied. But it's feasible, of course, that there may be some people in your database who are not going to ever be emailed. It may depend. You could potentially be storing contacts in Eloqua that don't have an email address. Maybe you've got people with cell or mobile phone numbers only, or some other form of ID. So something else to consider in that process. So first thing on the agenda is to uncover the less engaged contacts. So let's really start by trying to understand or finding out the audience, the less engaged people on the database. And again, another photograph for you to inspire a little bit of travel. This is actually in Sydney, only probably 45 minutes from where I live in Sydney. Beautiful beach location. So the use of language is important, and the words that we use to describe the type of campaign that we're wanting to run are also important. So is it a win-back campaign? Is it a reactivation campaign? Or is it in fact a re-engagement campaign? So depending on the words we use will largely determine how we act. So a win-back campaign generally is going to indicate that you've lost them previously. They were a customer and they're now a prospect. And so there's some work to do in order to win them back. So I'd argue that's slightly different to a re-engagement campaign. Reactivation and re-engagement, probably quite similar in what they mean, but essentially it's people sitting on the database who are not overly active in relation to what they're doing with you right now. Let's get a little bit tighter and try and figure that out. So I'm suggesting today we're all about re-engagement is the word we're using. So now we need to figure out, well, what defines engagement? How do we define this less engaged group? Now, of course, don't confuse an inactive email account, as in a hard bounce, with a human who is not active with your brand. Obviously, two very different things, but Eloqua can help you from a segmentation point of view to make the clear difference between those two. Now, if you're running lead scoring, that can be one good indicator, because the engagement side of your lead score model can be something that you can incorporate into your segmentation to identify this particular group. So think about that. Think about your lead scoring as being one tool, because they might have the right profile and there should be no reason why they're not engaging with you, but it's low or non-existent. Now, there are several ways that Eloqua can help you identify this particular group. The Contact Database Health Dashboard is a great place to start, and it can really help you get an idea of potentially how big or small this issue is of inactivity of certain sections of the database. Dashboards, as I said, is a great place to start. So let's jump in and have a look at how big a problem we think this might be within with your own database. So at Marketing Cube, we obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but we use Eloqua to do our own marketing. And so whenever we show you anything, it's actually from our live instance, not a demo instance, it's our live instance. So first thing I can see is new contacts. You can see we had some go in and then come back out again. That was a little bit of a test we were running. But down here, we start to see contact engagement. I typically find getting rid of the sent email for a moment, just to really get a better idea of what people are actually doing. As you get to the very bottom of this list, though, it really is this bottom these two bottom points that are of greatest interest. So this one is looking at the entire database and working out the percentage of reachable people that you have within that entire database. So reachability basically means that we're removing sort of hard bounces and global unsubscribes. So there's a small portion, and over here I can start to get a better idea of what that portion is. So this is now broken down by just the unreachable group to understand why they're unreachable. So 5.3% of bounce backs. Now that's something that we actually clean on a fairly regular basis. We remove those hard bounce backs from Eloqua. The next cycle for us is to go through and potentially look at removing some of the unsubscribed globally contacts as well. So just to constantly keep that as clean as possible, so that this percentage of reachability is as high as possible, because there are obviously commercial reasons why you want to have your Eloqua database as clean as possible. It's not a warehouse or storage facility for dead contacts. We want to make sure that the contacts we have in the database are contacts that we can actually talk to and communicate with. So looking at that, do we have a problem? Well, it gives us a little bit of an indication, but let's go back and think about how we can progress this a little bit further. All right, so what defines the less engaged? So segments is your best friend here, because segments can make it so easy to filter and to adjust what it is you're looking at. And at an easy starting point, there's 3 points there at the top of the screen that you can see, which is looking at those people in your database who have not been sent an email in X number of months, let's say 12 months for fun, not visited your website potentially, because even though you're not communicating with them from an outbound point of view, it's possible and possibly likely that they're visiting your website. So we want to make sure we exclude that as well. Now, page tagging is something that you're really going to need in order to make that happen. You could also look at those people who may well have been sent an email, but have not actually opened an email. Okay, so another group to think about. But as you go through this process, your exclusions are just as important as your inclusions. So the exclusions, the two that would make most sense, generally speaking, is to remove those who have hard bounced, or to remove those who have unsubscribed globally. Okay, so we've got a question here from George. We had some instances where Gmail would return email addresses as invalid, even though they were valid. By removing these contacts from the database, we've lost these contacts instead of keeping them, and to reset the invalid emails. What criteria do you use to determine when and how to remove contacts? Sure, George, great question. You specifically mentioned Gmail there. There was an issue, and you may or may not be aware of this, and it occurred right before Christmas. There was a note that came from Eloqua where Gmail apparently had received a bunch of emails from various Eloqua clients and had falsely returned information that it was a dead account. Eloqua received that information, and fairly quickly, we understand, we're able to go into all of those various instances, and they actually updated en masse the information to confirm that those people weren't hard bounces. So I'm wondering if that's a part of what you're potentially talking about. But typically for us, we would use the hard bounce construct. The other one is globally unsubscribed. Now, keeping in mind, when you delete a contact from Eloqua, while it reduces your contact count, there is still information kept and maintained in the back of your database. So should that person, for whatever reason, especially the unsubscribed individual, return to your database, Eloqua is able to join those two pieces of information together. All it does basically is keep, I think, email, first name, last name. It also holds on to their subscriptions. So if they, at an email group level, also the global, so you need to obviously, if they submit a form, we need to make sure we're globally subscribing them when they come back in through all of your forms. So the criteria to determine how to remove contacts for us is usually based on if it's flagged as a hard bounce back or if it's a global unsubscribe. Now, we never remove them from the CRM. They always remain in our CRM. So as a business, from a commercial point of view, we don't lose that contact. We simply remove them from Eloqua. So I trust that is helpful to you. So let's jump in and have a closer look at dashboards and segments to get a little bit of idea. Actually, we'll jump straight to segments, I think, and show you something to think about there. How do we build this audience? All right, so segments area of Eloqua under contacts. And here's one I prepared earlier. Okay, so what I've done here is I've looked at a few different levels of engagement, one being not sent any email. And so the criteria, let me just zoom in a little bit there for you in case that's a bit small. Okay, so what I've done here is I've used a 12-month threshold in this particular example, but of course you can change that to hours, days, weeks, or months that work for you, keeping in mind that you can't go back further than 2 years. Then those who have, or I've said here, or those who have not submitted a form within the last 12 months, two very good indications of engagement. And then depending on your database, and everybody's database will be different, we have a construct within ours called region. We never ask a person their region, we simply ask them their country, and then we have Eloqua do some smarts in the background. So if you, if you tell us you're in the United States or in Canada, we actually automatically assign you to the region called North America. Same with Europe. So if you're in Spain, I have someone from Spain with us on the line today. In that case, we would assign you to the EU. So we have a region to suit. And that just makes sometimes our segmentation and targeting a little bit easier as we go through. So 3,066 contacts. Well, actually, you can see it's 6,992. Now I refreshed this the other day, so it may change. It has changed slightly. There we go. But notice all of the exclusions. So I mentioned to you earlier that there may be other variables that you should consider excluding. So within our database, we have a flag in the CRM called inactive. It's just a checkbox against the lead or contact, actually against the contact in the CRM. The purpose of inactive is to stop the CRM user from unsubscribing everybody, because unsubscribe sends a very different message from a marketing point of view. It seems like everybody's unsubscribing, but people move on from jobs. They move from one job to another. And if you're in a B2B space, like many on the call today, that's not an unsubscribe. Okay, so we don't want that to falsely reveal potential things that are not real. So we have that flag. We've also got those globally unsubscribed, and these numbers you might remember pretty much from the dashboard that we looked at a moment ago. We also have a whole bunch of different account types as to how we categorize organizations. So of course, competitors, vendors, partner contacts, etc., that you can see there. And in this case, customers. So we're wanting to exclude customers because this is all about less engaged prospects. So these are other variables that you need to think about in your database that are going to be a little bit different for everybody. So there's my magic number. Now, of course, I can change this and play with this as much as I want. Let me delete some of these. Okay, so get rid of those. So you've got all of these engagement indicators over here on the right-hand side. So if we wanted to, for instance, look at people who had been sent any email and then not opened any email, as in not open. But I find that the best thing to do here is to do one filter at a time, especially here where we're trying to build out the audience. Whoops, sorry, within the last, I got my numbers around the wrong way there. Okay, so we're looking at contacts now who have been sent at least one email within the last 12 months. So we'll let that do some thinking. So what we want to see is the size of the audience and see how potentially big this audience is. So 3,022 people have been sent at least, or prospects have been sent at least one email. All right. So have they, and let's now look at those who have been sent one, but actually not opened any within the last 12 months. Kind of really is opening the kimono here, isn't it? As I said, this is live data. Okay, all good. That number came down significantly, so that's good news. Okay, so we're now down to 1,952 people. Now, if I wanted to filter that further for various reasons, you could add additional filters to industry. You could add additional filters of geography. You could introduce the lead score model. There are a whole range of different other filters that you can play with. In relation to the website activity, that one really requires you, so that you don't go crazy, to use page tags. Because remember, the visited websites function here within segmentation is at a URL level, okay? Now you're going to kill yourself going through and trying to find every single URL that relates to your website. So that's where page tagging is probably a much better exercise. It may not be definitive and cover every single, here we go, not visited. So you'll see within our websites, no, whoops, wrong one. Not visited page tags, not groups. So what we've done, for instance, is we have a range of pages on our website that talk about the user group. We have a range of, obviously, blog posts. So this becomes much easier to do because these page tags, so blog post contains all of the URLs on our blog, for example. So I could use that as another filter within the last 12 months. So we could maybe change that to an or, and like so. Group them and see what that number comes up to. Okay, the number's gone up slightly. All right. So there we go. So that's just one way, and probably the most efficient way to sort of start to uncover how inactive this audience is that we're trying, or the size of the audience that we're trying to target. So that's the fun part once we uncover the audience. All right, let's jump back in. Oh, we just wanted to give you a little bit of a reminder. I imagine your Oracle representatives have probably been in contact with you, but the Marquee Awards are open for 2021, and the submission deadline is the 26th of March, Eastern time, or it'll be daylight savings time by that point, I think, in the US. So you can see there's a URL right there, and you can, if you just Google it, you'll find the same thing. But hopefully some of you on the call will be in a position to submit an entry. That would be great news. All right, so re-engagement and some win-back strategies. So let's look, and now that we understand that audience, let's look at some ways to potentially try and re-engage them. Now, this particular photograph is taken on Rottnest Island in Western Australia, which is off the coast from Perth. And curious piece of information for you, Perth is geographically the most isolated city on the planet. So when you're in Perth, you can't be farther away from anything, or anyone. So beautiful place to go. Clear on the other side of the country from where I am, but you can see it's probably worth the trip. You'd think I work for the Australian Tourism Authority or something, wouldn't you? But anyway, okay. I thought this was a really interesting point. Many of you will probably be familiar with the folks at Return Path and from Validity. Now, they've just recently changed the name of their product too, but I wasn't able to quite gauge that, or I think I've forgotten what it was. But their point here in relation to how some of those, Gmail, Hotmail, Yahoo, etc., organizations will treat your incoming emails. So the Gmail and Outlook use to determine whether or not incoming email is spam and should be treated as such is by monitoring how engaged recipients are with your messages. So are these people logging in? How frequently do they open, read, or delete, or do they just ignore your communications? So if you think about the audience we're trying to identify, it's an audience who we're potentially sending emails to, but they're not actually opening anything, or it's an audience that we actually haven't sent anything to for, let's say, 12 months. So if you look at this sort of information, there's every chance that, unfortunately, these guys, being Gmails and Outlooks, etc., are going to push your email either into spam and make it harder. So you're going to have to be creative about how you manage this process, and maybe thinking of a little bit of a cross-channel or multi-channel approach, right? So it may not be that email is the only option. It could be a little bit of retargeting through LinkedIn, matched audiences, those sorts of things, trying to reach out to these people through a cross-channel point of view. So I give that to you purely for thinking music, just to think about. All right, so some strategies. There are loads of them, but looking through all the different pieces of information, I was able to sort of filter it down to maybe 4, essentially, that would be worthwhile thinking about. First one, it's been a while. So that is literally that email that some of you have probably sent yourself or may have received. It's an opportunity to ask for specific feedback. It's a chance to reacquaint yourself with that particular organization. If people aren't engaging with you, you really don't have too much to lose. So don't be afraid to ask them why they're not engaging potentially. If your attribution data is really clever and you've got that stored either on the contact or maybe on a custom data object, why don't you bring that information back and remind the individual about how they came to be in your database? So was it the blog subscription? Is that how they first came into the organization? How was it? So remind them of that experience. Maybe ask them, did their subscription not meet their expectations? Or if it's about them being a customer and not buying from you recently, having good product information available and to engage with and just talk to them about what's going on. So that's the it's been a while type of strategy. The cheeky or comedic approach is largely going to depend on your audience and probably also depend on your brand. Is this something that your brand does and could do quite well? I recently was the lucky recipient of one of our customers who's in the technology space. And the email came into my inbox. Now, you've got to appreciate, I get lots of emails. I'm sure you do too, but I get lots of emails from customers because I subscribe to just about everything that they do. And it said, "Happy birthday, Derek," in the subject line. Now, my birthday's in May. And this email came through in November. And I'm like, oh, what's going on here? So I open up the email and there's this great picture of a guy sitting there eating a pizza, which I love pizza. But anyway, he's sitting there and he's eating this pizza. And it's like, happy birthday, Derek. We've ordered your pizza with extra anchovies. And then there's kind of like a ... And it's like, oh, it's not your birthday. Oh, how did we get that wrong? And, oh, you don't like anchovies. I don't know who does like anchovies, and so it was really, look, it totally got me hook, line, and sinker. And the whole call to action was, in order for us to send you more personalized communications and to know you better, could you update your preferences? Would you tell us a little bit more about you? So that worked well for them. I responded to that. I thought it was quite amusing. It certainly got my attention. And for them, it worked quite well. So their target audience are people buying technology and also sort of a more C-suite and vice president type of level of audience. And apparently it was received quite well. So that's one way to play from a cheeky or comedic way of doing things. The panic approach or FOMO, fear of missing out, is potentially another one. Not too much of a panic, but the panic could be something to the effect of, we haven't heard from you for quite a while. We're going to unsubscribe you and remove you from our database. If you'd like to remain here, click here, which essentially is a re-opt-in, I suppose, or a resubscription back in. So that's one way to look at it. But the other one, because we're all Eloqua users, and this is kind of what we should be doing, right? This is why we use Eloqua largely, is to nurture them back to engagement. And so to really look at understanding the information you have, past behavior, profile, industry breakdown from a B2B point of view. Understanding industry sometimes can be a great way to tailor communications. That can be through use of dynamic content, from imagery through to subtle changes in the email itself, or even on the landing pages as well. So that can be one way. A single email could in fact be representative of a number of different people in different industries. So something for you to think about. So I did manage to find a couple of examples, and as you would probably appreciate as Eloqua users, trying to find B2B examples is almost impossible. But what I did find is this great website called reallygoodemails.com. Now that's a domain everybody wants, right? reallygoodemails.com. So these guys are in the framing business. And so this one I thought was quite cute. The subject line, as you can see, was "Goodbyes are hard." So they're kind of tugging at the heartstrings a little bit there. They're taking the hint. You aren't interested in easy, affordable custom framing. That's okay. Now, I'd be fascinated. I love framing. I have too many things framed in this house. But anyway, since you haven't been checking our emails lately, we'll go ahead and take you off our list. Still want to hear from us? Just click below. We really hope you'll stay. So nice, simple, and to the point, essentially. The only thing missing from this, which is probably hopefully what you've also identified, is there's no personalization, not even a hello first name, etc. So I think that could be enhanced with a little bit of personalization and even some imagery. But at the same time, keeping it nice and simple and clean is a good idea. The next one that we found, slightly different example, and I'm trying to put my head in myself in the mind of a New York Times marketing person trying to grow their subscriber database. I sit in their database, but I haven't given them a penny, right? So I just get little bits of information they feed through, and they're always incentivizing me. But I liked this approach. It's, I suppose, a little bit of the Fomo approach potentially. So do 1 million digital subscribers know something you don't? I'm like, oh, really? So again, there's no personalization involved there, because if I'm sitting on their database, hopefully they at least know who I am or have taken an opportunity to get to know me. But I imagine there's a big chunk of their database that are really just sitting there taking up space and receiving information, but are not actually paying to subscribe to the New York Times. And I'm sure that's a common problem for many of these newspaper organizations around the world. And you may have seen some issues in the news recently with Australian government and Facebook. And if you're curious about that, we can send you some details, but not over Facebook for the moment. So this subject line, "Time is running out to be a digital part of New York Times 1 million digital subscriber milestone." Now, there was no date on this, so I don't know how old this is, by the way, but another example to think about. So then what we need to think about is just some general tips. And these are some tips and ideas that through observation, working with clients over the years, and also a little bit of research online and looking at a few different examples, etc. So first one is consider your tone and your voice. So we don't want an email necessarily that's completely separate to every other piece of marketing collateral that you produce. It needs to fit your tone, and so people don't think it's spam or don't think someone's trying to get something out of them or cheat them potentially. I think use of dynamic content is a really good idea. So using dynamic content for imagery, especially, and opening paragraphs and subject lines. The subject lines is such a great idea. It's not often, though, until you understand your audience through segmentation and you actually go through and have a look in detail at those individuals, that you start to realize, well, you know what, I think we're going to need to change up the subject lines, because different things will get different types of people. So whether it's persona based maybe, or even if it's down to job profile or job category, whatever it is, but those being able to change those subject lines can be quite helpful. Now, if you have a preference center set up, and even if it's potentially even the basic Eloqua preference center out of the box, there is another way you can incentivize them. Use that preference center and drive people to it, not just simply to unsubscribe, but to get them to reconfirm details, their contact information, their profile information, and your subscriptions. What is it you're offering these particular people? The highlights reel concept. So a highlights reel could be a way to present think of it almost like a little bit of a custom newsletter that could potentially show some highlights of the last 12 months. And don't make it too big, right? So you don't want 25 different articles, maybe just near 3. Is probably 3 or 4 is maximum you kind of want to go. But it's a chance to show the individual, what they've missed out on. Over the last 12 months, these have been our 2 most popular blog posts. We had a major announcement of something in whatever, August, etc. So a bit of the FOMO again, potentially. And again, with probably a good call to action to update their preferences. But the other thing is don't let this type of a campaign, especially if you schedule it as an always on campaign, don't let it just gather dust in the back and forget about it. Make sure you drop in some diary notes to probably at least do a pulse check, certainly a month or 2 after launch, and then potentially at least quarterly to review and have a look at the performance and see how that's working. Now, of course, with Eloqua and the campaign canvas, you can route people in a whole range of different directions. So if you think about that concept of nurturing them back to engagement, it's not one email. Okay, so one email to a list of inactive people or less engaged people is not going to solve the problem. You need to think about this as a discussion and a journey, and the canvas is obviously the logical place to sort of map out what that's going to look like. Okay, we have a question here from Jeremy. Someone has submitted a FOQ but may not have received any email. They will be in the segment. For us, they are active. Shouldn't it be an and? Right, okay. Jeremy, absolutely, sure. So everybody that's going to be filtering from a segmentation point of view, everyone's database is going to be different and there'll be loads of different variables for sure. So absolutely, you need to jump in and out and apply different filters, and probably sit with a colleague as well, because there are things that your colleague will think about that you may not, etc. So yeah, absolutely. You need to probably play with his ands and ors as you move through that process. Alrighty, so coming this weekend for many Eloqua clients on Pod 1 is release 21A. So quick highlight for some of the various points, the archiving feature. You'll notice previously you could archive individual assets, so an individual email or an individual form. As of release 21A, you'll be able to archive an entire folder, which is making much more sense clearly and is a much better way to do it. Just note that that ability specifically is what we call controlled availability. So you'll need to get your Eloqua administrator to request that feature be turned on in your instance. It only takes a couple of minutes and is usually completed within 24 to 48 hours by the Oracle Help Desk and Eloqua support team or Eloqua product management team. So also, if you're, again, an administrator of the platform, Eloqua will now include the last login time from exports of user engagement or user activity. So that can be helpful. Excuse me, some of you may have had issues with some browsers, primarily Chrome, from an image point of view, largely being that images can be stored as HTTP, while your landing pages will be HTTPS. So this fixed images construct can help you go through and update those images, and you do that from within the component library. So again, once you come around to Monday next week, or if you log in over the weekend, you'll see those changes taking place. The next one is control form submissions. And so what this is going to enable you to do, it's almost like the lights are on, but nobody's home construct, in that you'll have a form sitting on a landing page live on the internet, but the ability to actually submit that form is turned off. There can be multiple applications, and I was trying to think through the most obvious ones. For me, I think the most obvious one is probably around events. Potentially, you may want to, if you reach capacity or are in fact oversubscribed, you may want to turn the form off. I would probably be more inclined to either turn that into a wait list or to potentially redirect that page to a page saying that the event is oversubscribed, but thank you for your interest. Could be helpful in a range of different ways, but if you need quickly to control a form and to literally turn it off without having to redirect and all that kind of stuff, you'll be able to do that directly from within the form. And of course, the Redwood branding, so the new Oracle look and feel that's working its way across all of Oracle's applications, continues throughout Eloqua. So on Monday, you'll see an extension of that through some of the dashboards, Launchpad pages, and also the dashboards. So you'll see that change as you log in on the weekend or come in on Monday. And we have a question from Marie Claire. Hello, Marie Claire. How are you? So I have a question about lead scoring. I've worked with organizations using it in different capacities, but the issue remains the same. It works well and it's easy to put in place, but it's such a multi-level scoring system that actually optimizing it becomes a very complex analytic task. Do you have a recommendation on how to best use the module? Yeah, great question. So look, we use lead scoring at Marketing Cube, and we have a number of our clients who use it. We have one client who's very specifically uses lead scoring on a per campaign basis. So it's very specific, and they're constantly refreshing and creating new lead score models, which is an interesting approach. But look, I think my tip is always to start simple and then get more complex. I think the mistake that can be made sometimes with lead scoring is going in way too hard and way too heavy. We need to pull back. And I will definitely go through the process of when you set a model active and let it do the scoring and then have a look at the results. If you want to make changes, deactivate that model and save as to create the new one. If you simply have the one model and you keep making changes to it, it becomes very difficult for you to go back and understand with clarity the difference between the two models, why this one potentially is working better or potentially why it's not working. So we can certainly add lead scoring to another exercise for the user group. Absolutely. And we can potentially do a little bit more of a deeper dive for you on that one. Best advice initially would be just to take it easy and not go too complex. But unfortunately, it is an ongoing exercise. It's not something that you can really set and forget. It does need to be looked at. It does need to be reviewed. We do need to make sure that the engagement side of the model is pointing to relevant folders of assets, so relevant campaigns, relevant emails, etc., that are specific to the audience that you're looking to. So I hope that helps. Thank you for the question. Now, this is a fairly self-serving part of the exercise. And so I was wondering if I could just get from you a little bit of indication about how you found your time today. And why you do that, let me just explain a little bit about the user group. So we run the user group on a monthly basis. We've been doing that, as I said, for about 2.5 or 3 years. And we're now thrilled and excited to do the same thing for North and South America. And thank you so much for being here with our initial live audience. We believe that the live construct is the best construct because it's when the questions are asked, etc. That's what seems to make all the difference, is that opportunity to ask some questions. We'll be looking to join you again next month on the 24th of March. And so our blog posts, so if you go to marketingcube.com.au, and we'll send you these links so you have them anyway, but at marketingcube.com.au, you'll find our blog. And in the blog, you'll find loads of replays for the user group. There's lead scoring ones in there. There's event management, etc., all sorts of different things available there. So I strongly encourage you to have a look at that, and you're welcome to access any of those. The blog has a little bit more information and also provides links generally to the Help Center and any other parts of the ecosystem that might make sense and be helpful. Okay, so let me end that poll. Thank you very much for taking the time to do that. Okay, well, thank you guys. That's really, we appreciate that. Thank you. I hope you got a bit of a chuckle with the last one. And thank goodness no one selected number 5. That's good news. Okay, so we'll definitely be in contact for next month. And as I said, 3 p.m., we'll figure that one out and confirm that for you. But if you do have any questions, if anything out of anything we've talked about right now, I'm happy to stay here on the line. We've finished a little bit early. We've got 10 minutes to go. Here we have one question. MC is always a very concrete source for answers. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. That's, we really appreciate that comment. Thank you. MC Marketing Cube. So thank you. And KZ, are you able to add Zoom answers into Eloqua profiles? Hang on a minute. Right. Okay. Sorry. I'm not going to say no to that one. We've actually, the out of the box, unfortunately, there seems to be some delay with Zoom. I don't know where the delay is, if it was Zoom or Oracle. They've still got the 2016 Zoom connector app sitting on the App Store. Now, we were promised last November that there would be a new version of the Zoom app. Now, does that Zoom app enable access to that type of information? So if we ask survey questions within Zoom, can Eloqua then capture those responses by contact and bring them into the platform? Today it doesn't. No. Does the new app do it? I'm not sure. I honestly haven't seen it yet, which is part of the problem. One of our developers is actually developing a little bit of a solution that does talk to custom data objects. So it's still in beta. And we're still sort of having a play with that. But those things all appear to be visible, from what I understand, from the developer. So we'll need to sort of take that one and put it aside and come back to you. We certainly have a good proportion. I'd say the majority of our customers who have webinar platforms are using Zoom. So there's certainly a need out there. So hopefully that helps. You're welcome, KZ. Thanks for joining us. All right, folks. Well, as I said, I'm happy to stay here on the line for a few minutes. If you do have any other questions you like to shoot through, I'm more than happy to answer those for you. Otherwise, thanks so much for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next month. Thank you, George.